she did not have a printer. So I had to print it for her and then mail it to her so that she could sign it and file it. Okay, so I was quite busy. Her texts contains 18 pages. Okay, that's quite a lot to print out. Today's topics, I chose this song, which is again a Stephen Foster song, and I like his songs very much. And his songs are for people like us, the older generation. People nowadays hardly sing his songs, but there are many beautiful songs that he wrote. Usually he wrote songs about Black people in the South or other regular, I would say regular meaning people in the North or in the West. Yeah, the song like Oh Susanna is a song for people in the West during the California gold rush. People who went to look for gold, they all sing his song, Oh Susanna. It became very, very popular. However, he wrote many songs about the South, and this is one of them. And it's called Massa's in the Cocoa Ground. And it's from the perspective of a Black slave. And it's got lots of grammatical errors, particularly written to show that this person is a less educated Black slave. So here we have the in place of THE. It is Massa's in the cocoa ground. Because this is about a funeral, song people sing at the funeral. So I picked Shi Jing's poem, which is called Huang Niao. It's also about a funeral. And in the course of talking about these things, I would mention human sacrifice because the Shi Jing's Huang Niao is about human sacrifice. That is 殉葬. And last time we talked about England, Great Britain, and the United Kingdom. So I collected a lot of information so that we could talk about this thing. And I would like to talk about this because it's such a huge topic. I put it at the very end after everything is done. Then we'll talk about England, Great Britain, and the United Kingdom. So let's start with the vocabulary from last week. These are pretty simple. I hope to go over them quickly. Subscribe is to 订阅 a magazine or newspaper or email. You could subscribe to a news from a company or whatever, and that's also called a subscribe. And the noun is subscription. And then we talked about reign, which is when you're a ruler, whether you're a king, a queen, or an emperor, or whatever ruler. Maybe if it's a smaller country, it could be not even a king. It could be a duchess or something like duke. You are reigning over the people in your kingdom. That's the word reign, which is a verb, and it's also a noun. Novelist is a very common word, 就是写小说的人哈。Amicable is 友好的哈。When I look at amicable, I naturally thought about things that are not amicable. That is, when people get a divorce, we sometimes, rarely, we would describe it as an amicable split. They are splitting on friendly terms, then we say that this divorce is amicable. So it's rare. that a divorce is amicable. Usually it's full of hostility, fighting, and argument, very toxic. And then there's a plaque, which is a 纪念牌匾. So if you go see, say, go to Shakespeare's home, then the building would have a plaque next to it that says former residence of William Shakespeare or things like that. That's called a 纪念牌匾. You can also use it to describe the plaque on your teeth, on your gum, 就是牙齿里面的什么？有没有人知道那个中文叫
牙垢吗？
牙垢是。
牙垢，我以为好像是就是脏的地方，可是它这个是有点结实了，就是有一点石灰质的那种，叫做一个 plaque 哈，这个是平常用的字，可是更比较，特别你去旅行的话，很多地方都会有 plaque 这个字，上面就会写这个是谁住的地方，哪年到哪年的时候他在这里怎么样的。Then we talked about the TV series 这个叫做 series 就是一个影集，不是一个电影，而是说一个接一个，每个礼拜也许有一次，比方说星期一or whatever time of the day of the week. So a series of these episodes would combine to become a drama series or a comedy series or whatever. And when you have a series, you have a group of people who are committed to produce one episode at a time over a period of time. And it's important for them to have a pilot in the beginning, that is to show the big bosses what you intend to do with this series. And if they like your pilot,那就是第一集哈, then it becomes a series, and there will be many following that. In the United States, it's usually when you have it for a whole season, you would have 39 episodes. But nowadays, it's very flexible. Some series are very short, maybe 3 or 5 instead of weekly. And of course, once you have a TV program that became a series, you're going to be very rich. And if it's year after year, then you could see that every time when this TV program is in production, all the cars parked in front of that studio would become better and better cars because all these people are getting richer. However, you don't necessarily have that good luck, and your series can be canceled. Cancel 我们平常常用来做取消，很多事情都可以取消。可是，在 TV series 的时候，这个就是专门讲你一个 series 变成 regularly scheduled 以后，后来因为看的人不够多，所以就被 cancel 了。这个是一个常用的 TV 的一个字，叫做 cancel 或者 cancellation. Last time I talked about taxes, and I did not go into detail about progressive taxes and the regressive taxes. We often heard about progressive taxes, 就叫做累进税哈，很少听说过累退税的哈。And the poll tax, last time we talked about poll tax, that is a 累退税，就是说穷人付的比有钱人还多，这个就叫做 regressive taxes. And usually we see, for example, income tax. When you have more income, you are kicked up a bracket into a higher percentage. So that tax is called the progressive. 就是说收入的人赚钱的人或者有钱的人， 他交的比例比那个穷人要交的多，这种叫做 progressive taxes. So usually for a country, when they talk about income taxes, they would have brackets. Brackets 就是brackets 其实是一种怎么说？括号哈 ，OK， bracket。那 bracket 呢，就是说从这里到这里这一段叫做一个 bracket， 而在这个 progressive taxes 里面，你就会有把 people's income put into brackets. Those who earn under $20,000 a year is the lowest bracket. Then maybe they would pay 10% of taxes. Then there's a bracket between 20,000 and 50,000. I'm just drawing these numbers randomly. It's not that we're using that. So you have the next bracket, then those people who earn more than those at the bottom would pay a higher percentage of their income for the government. So that's a higher bracket. And it is a socialist idea that people who are richer should contribute more for the good of the country. So they should pay more. And the progressive taxes in Europe would be much more obviously progressive. For example, there was a time, you probably have heard of a movie director in Sweden. I think it's in Sweden. Yes, called Ingmar Bergman. He was a very famous movie director and made a lot of money. However, he gave up his citizenship in Sweden and became an American citizen, because at that time, the government would charge the richest people who earn the highest income. They would charge those people to pay 107% of tax. So when you're beyond that top, next to the top level bracket, then all your income would go to the government and more. You have to pay 107% of your income above a certain level. So that's progressive taxes at the very extreme. Nowadays, I don't think that is existing anymore. So these are the two words. Regressive 就是退下来的意思， progressive 就是进上去的意思。And of course, people would always try to evade taxes. And the richer they are, the better they could hire able accountants to help them to avoid paying taxes. So this is called tax evasion. For example, people, of course, not only that they could hire accountants to do that for them, they also have to have less ethics. People like Trump, Donald Trump, for many, many years, he would not be paying any taxes on his millions of dollars of income, not because he did not earn that income, but he lied. So that's called the tax evasion. For example, when his father gave him a big building, which is worth, say, $100 million, he would report that he only got this building for 10 million or even 5 million, so that he did not have to pay a lot of taxes on that. Things like that. He did a lot of cheating when he applied for a loan from Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank said they knew that Donald Trump's application is not truthful. He's just lying all the time. That's how they evade paying taxes. Okay. Then we have, I'll show you this picture. This is called tartan 中文叫做格子呢，就是说这个呢布呢，所谓呢布就是 wool, a fabric made of wool. 这个 tartan 呢in at least Scotland, they traditionally, each family would have their own kind of tartan that represent their clan. And when they have a gathering, it would be like this. Men would be wearing tartan skirts and playing the musical instrument, which is called the pipes, Scottish pipes. We're talking about the Celtic tradition, and right now in the world, most of that tradition is preserved in Scotland and Ireland. Only these two places still have people who speak that language, the Celtic language, and do things like this one, wearing kilts, 这种裙子叫做 kilts. 是不是女人穿的，是男人穿的。And it is said, I heard it's true that when you wear a kilt, you do not wear underwear, but I could never prove that, but that's how they say. And so, for example, Prince Charles of England, when he's wearing these traditional garb, people would try to take pictures of him from underneath his skirt in order to see whether he is true to the tradition. But let's not talk about this, okay? So we have clan, which is a 家族, these clans in Scotland and Ireland, they are very family oriented, and the relationship among the clan members is very strong. And the tartan is the kind of fabric that represent this clan. When I went to Scotland, I had a roommate who came from Australia, and her mission was to go to find her root. And her uncle did a lot of research so that she could rent a car and drive the car to his old family village. And if you go to Scotland, all the souvenir shops would sell souvenirs that contains the tartan, how do you say that? For example, my roommate, her name was Susan McLaren. So she could go to this racks, souvenir racks in the store, and choose all the keychains and find the one that says McLaren. And then that one would be the one that contains her family tartan, okay? And they also have so-called coat of arms, which is their old tradition. And this coat of arms, whether it's a lion, an eagle, or mountain or river, that little picture would be on their family coat of arms. And a related word would be feudalism, 就是封建制度哈。这个 feudalism 就是 a ruler like a king, he would have some able assistants, the aristocrats, 就是贵族，而不是国王哈。那这是 they would fight for the ruler and win battles for the ruler, and the ruler would give them the rank of 公侯伯子男, one of those things, I just mentioned there are dukes and the counts and the earls and the barons and all these things. They are the different levels of the aristocrats. 我来写一个 aristocrat. Aristocrat. 这个字就是代表这个贵族阶级So all these words under this bullet is about, I'm sorry, the C is not there, aristocrat, okay. There's a Disney cartoon called the Aristocats, 就是他讲的都是贵族的，可是整个都是猫的故事，所以叫做 Aristocats. Okay. Then we talk about a pandemic. They are contagious or infectious disease. These meaning 是会传染的哈. It can be passed from one person to another by either touching or breathing or whatever. 就是certain kind of contact would cause one contagious disease to be passed on to another person. Ancestor 是祖先的意思哈，现在很多人都喜欢讲究这个怎么说 genealogy 哈 Let me put this one here. Genealogy 就是要讲究研究你的祖先，那的几代前的祖先是谁，从哪里来的哈？很多人喜欢这样。And on the internet, you can get apps either free or you can buy apps that would help you organize your ancestry charts. And some of the bigger ones, like Ancestor.com or something, they have huge database. People who use their apps would use this app to organize their genealogy. And then this company would combine all these things together. So if they see that you have certain ancestors from where, they would let you know that there are other people with similar ancestors. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, some people really spend a lot of time on the genealogy of their ancestors. And the next one is lip sync. That is when you could be a speaker or an actor or a singer, but you do not make any sound. You just move your lips so that it appears that you were talking or singing something while a recording was playing behind you. That's called lip sync. Sometimes without that hyphen, and sometimes that sync is spelled as SYNC. The next word is not very common, but we as Chinese, we would like to learn this word. This is called the diaspora, 就是流散在外国的侨胞。Chinese people are probably one of the most having diasporas all over the world. It's almost impossible to find a place where there are no Chinese, because over thousands and thousands of years, people have been emigrating to other countries and established roots and so on and so forth. But in America, a very major diaspora would be the Irish people. Of course, there are other people too, like German, English, whatever. There are people from everywhere that came to America to naturalize or to stay here. However, the Irish people, being more recent, they stick together more. Yeah, actually, there are lots of Jewish people everywhere too, but they tend to not to use this word diaspora because they did not have their own country for 2,000 years. So they're just refugees or just wandering around the world instead of forming a diaspora. Here we talk about potato blight, and I was able to get some pictures here. This is a potato leaf that was infected with potato blight. And this is a potato that was infected with this blight. blight is just a problem or disease, but there are many kinds of blights. And in the case of potatoes, their blight is also called late blight or potato blight. So it's very specific. And for a time, it was everywhere. And even now, it's quite common. So if you want to plant tomato, you should buy those that were inoculated. Inoculated is the word for 打预防针, but for not for people. For example, snow peas or potatoes, when you treat them with something that we call inoculation, then this certain disease will not develop. 这个像屁就是豌豆这种东西呢。If you plant it, you almost always will get a certain kind of disease later, not in the beginning. You plant it and later it becomes diseased and it becomes moldy, 就是有点长霉的样子哈。所以 when you go buy seeds for peas, you would look at the package and see if it is ination resistant. That is because peas have a kind of disease called the ination. And if the peas were treated in a certain way or inoculated in a certain way. Let me put up those words here. You have inoculate. This word can be used to mean human instead of plants. You're inoculated with, say, cholera, 怎么说？霍乱病打预防针 or TB, all these disease you can be inoculated against, and they are equivalent to what are the other words that vaccine? Okay, vaccine is the 预防针 itself. So if you want to say the verb, it's vaccinated. Okay, so apparently I spelled this wrong, but how come? Maybe somebody can check it for me. It has to be in INN. Okay, anyway, I can tell you next time whether this is right or wrong.
Joe, we cannot see your screen.
You can't?
No, because you're showing the potato still.
Yes, it is potato, but I'm writing this right above it.
Right above it. Okay, I see.
Yeah, right above it. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Maybe it has a red line on it because it's grammatically incorrect. I don't know. Yeah, it looks like it's, oh, well, still it's not correct.
Yeah, I checked the dictionary, only one N, not a double N.
Oh, only one?
Yes,
I tried, but it didn't work. Besides, you should pronounce it as inoculate. So it has to be two.
It's John is correct.
It is correct? Okay.
INN, yeah.
I think it is correct, but I don't know why the spell check says it's wrong. Okay. So let me go back to here. We have potato blight. Then we have funeral, which is a 葬礼. Then we also learn the word wake, which is a less formal and more, for example, if you have a funeral for a president, you would not have a wake because wake is for family and friends. Usually it's the night before the funeral. So people would stay awake and talk about this person who died. So it's called a wake. And I also mentioned that the word wake is also the waves behind a boat. When you drive a boat on the water, you would see a trail of the wave that's left behind by the boat. That's called a wake. So that's the different usages of this word. And the last word is forehead or forehead, 就是你的额头, huh? And these are the words. Last time I talked about the word, about the Zoom founder, ubiquitous, huh? So sometimes when I read the news during the week and I found something, I would mention it to you. And this week I read this about Pope Francis and Confucius. Well, Confucius is, I added that. The story is about Pope Francis. Huh? Pope Francis was the bishop of Buenos Aires, Argentina. He was chosen to be the Pope. And when the previous Pope resigned, that was Benedict XVI. And if you have seen a wonderful movie called The Two Popes, I love that movie very much. I don't know how much truth is in there, but it's a wonderful story about how Pope Benedict XVI chose Bishop Francis, not Bishop Francis. He was not called bishop yet, so he was a bishop. I forgot his name. Well, I used to remember. Anyway, that was a wonderful movie called The Two Popes. It was like last year, yeah. Pope Francis was interviewed on September 12, 2020, that was during last week, by a reporter whose name is Petrini here, Petrini, okay. And he says, having sex and eating good food is simply divine, okay? So that made me think of Confucius. That's where Confucius came in. Confucius says, 饮食男女，人之大欲存焉. That's almost exactly what the Pope just said. 就是说, eating good food and having sex, these are our natural desire, and you just cannot ignore it. Pope is saying that there were many Christian people like priests or bishops or whatever in the past. They want to keep their believers down. They say, you cannot dance, you cannot go to the movies, and you cannot indulge in good food and whatever. All these things, Pope Francis says, it is simply divine to do these things that are by nature a God-given pleasure. Yeah. So he's told this reporter, he says, pleasure arrives directly from God. 这个是上帝给你的快乐哈。It's neither Catholic nor Christian nor anything else. It is simply divine 哈。虽然他是一个 Catholic church, 他说他没有说 being Catholic we should enjoy these things. He said this is not Catholic, not Christian. It's simply divine. 就是上帝给人类的赐予的这些东西哈。And I read that and I thought about Confucius. I was very happy about it. Okay, so now we're going to sing this song. And this song is Massa's in the Cocoa Ground. And I would like to stop share, okay? And I would share screen, which is here. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
Round the meadows evergreen, the donkey's mournful song, while the mockingbird am singing, happy as the day and dawn. Where the ivy am a-creeping o'er the grassy mound, there old Massa am a-sleeping, sleeping in the cold, cold ground. Down in the cornfield, hear that mournful sound. the darkies and the weeping, Massa in the cold, cold ground. When the autumn leaves were falling, when the days were cold, 'twas hard to hear old Master calling, 'cause he was so weak and cold. Now the orange trees are blooming on the sandy shore. Now the summer days are coming, Massa never calls no more. Down in the cornfield, hear that mournful sound. All the darkies and the weeping, Massa's in the cold, cold ground. Massa make the darkies love him, 'cause he was so kind. Now they sadly weep above him, mourning 'cause he left them behind. I cannot work before tomorrow, 'cause the teardrops flow. I try to drive away my sorrow, picking on the old banjo. Down in the cornfield, hear that mournful sound. All the darkies and the weeping, Massa's in the cold, cold ground.
I'm not going to play the other one. I just want to show Al Jolson. He is a white man with a black face. Okay.
Round the meadows I'm a ringing,
Let me see.
the old folks mourn the long.
Okay, I'm going to. Okay, here I am. Share screen. I'm coming back to this screen. Okay, so I picked two songs. There are many on YouTube. However, I only found this one, which is a karaoke. And I prefer to find songs with that is in the form of a karaoke, because easier for you to follow the words and sing. However, I would like you to take a look at Al Jolson. He is a very famous singer. And if you haven't heard of him, it is a good time to learn about such a person. Here we have the lyrics, and I have underlined many places that are grammatically incorrect. Here we have the written as the, and the M, which is a wrong word. Around the meadows is a ringing. Anyway, M is totally a wrong word, because M is only used behind the word I. So it is a wrong word, but there are many words here. You can see all the way down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 M's right here on this page, which are not what they should be. And I was watching Gershwin's opera, Porgy and Bess, recently, and there are many songs sung by the Black people, and it used I is or you is, which are also wrong. That's because these people who are Black, they came from another country. They were never taught English. They were just put there to be a slave, to work in the field or in the house. so they could not speak good English, or it's just what the environment they were in that made things so, not because they are less educated, which it is. They are less educated, but it's not their fault at all. So many people, when they sing this song or they listen to this song or many of Stephen Foster's songs, they would say it is not right. He was making jokes of Black people as if they were stupid, but they were not stupid. This is just wrong. But he was living in a totally different time. And at that time, there was nothing that's called the politically correct. So we'll just have to take his word for it. And there are people who want to ban Mark Twain's books like Tom Sawyer, Adventures of Tom Sawyer or Adventures of Huckleberry Finn 哈。我在说的是这个 Mark Twain 就是马克吐温哈，他写的书汤姆历险记或者是 Huckleberry Finn 的历险记哈。These are extremely powerful novels, very good stories and very funny. And he is a really good writer, and he is not a person to look down upon Black people. However, he uses words like niggers, which is considered very, very wrong nowadays for people to say about Black people. So many schools argued about banning those books. And I don't think you should ban books for things that happened in the past and that it was common and regular, normal in those ages. This is just one thing I want to throw in here. The Darkies, Mournful Song, 他们的悲伤的歌哈，所谓的 mourn 除了悲伤以外，最主要的就是说人死了以后的这个悲伤哈。While the mockingbirds am singing, 这个应该就是说 are singing 哈。mockingbird 是一种 bird， 好像我以为好像是美国特别有的 bird, but when we were in, say, in Galapagos, there were a lot of mockingbirds too. So it's not exclusively in America, but we haven't seen one in Taiwan. Happy as the day is long, where the ivy is creeping over the grassy mound. Dear, 这个是 D-E-A-R 的意思哈。Dear old Massa, Massa 其实是 master 的意思 because master, the word is kind of long with several syllables. So people would have difficulty pronouncing it and they just say the first two syllables, which is Massa, with some corruption in there. So old master died and the slaves were surrounding this hole that is to be his grave and sing songs. Dear old Massa is sleeping in the cold, cold ground. Huh? These are, the lines are pretty simple except that they have a lot of grammatically wrong words in there. So the story of this song is that we are having a funeral right here at the grave of old master who was kind to us. And we're singing, oh, well, it didn't say we're singing a song. It's mockingbirds are singing, okay? And then follows the chorus, which is repeated after each verse. Down in the cornfield, hear that mournful song. All the darkies are weeping, huh? We could say something like weeping, but we could also add a word a in front of weeping, especially when you're singing and you need one syllable to match the melody. You would say a weeping, or in the previous paragraph, we had a ringing, that is just ringing, but they put an a in the front to make up for the missing syllable. Okay. All the darkies am a weeping, Massa's in the cocoa ground. That's the first verse. Then came the second verse. When the autumn leaves were falling, when the days were cold, it was hard to hear old master calling because he was so weak and old. The word because is oftentimes changed to cause in the song when there's not enough syllable in the melody. So cause is because. It says when the autumn leaves were falling, the master was so old that he was so weak. And now the orange trees are blooming on the sandy shore. And then there's summer days. When the summer days are coming, master never calls no more. These are full of grammatical errors. Never 就是他写成 never 那 calls 平常你是说 master does not call anymore. You can say master never calls anymore, or you can say master calls no more, but it is common for Black people, especially at that time, to say double negative while they mean single negative. The correct way to do a double negative is 负负得正，就是变成正的了。However, there are common vernacular way of speaking that would do a double negative when they only mean a single negative. This is a prime example. Then the chorus is the same, Let me take that chorus out. Okay. Then there's another paragraph, which is Master make the darkies love him because he was so kind. Now they, this D-E-Y is they sadly weep above him because the master is in the coffin underground now. Mourning because he leave them behind. I cannot work before tomorrow because the teardrops flow. I try to drive away my sorrow. 我想要把我的悲哀赶开哈，我们可以用 drive 这个字来说 drive away my sorrow. Picking on the old banjo, You have a banjo which is very similar to a guitar. 可是它下面是圆圆的，而且就 compared to a guitar, it is round. It has a round box. And it has a longer neck, but it's played similarly. And I think it's a southern musical instrument. It's, well, this kind of instrument you can find in many other countries. You can go to Russia, to Israel, to Hawaii. They all have such kind of plucking. 我们叫它做 plucking 的 The musical instrument 就是这样拨着弹的，而不是拉弦的哈。Basically, there's 弦，小提琴或者胡琴这些是弦的哈。那另外一种就是 plucked， 就是 P-L-U-C-K 哈，这种是拨着来弹的，也许是这样往外拨，也许是这样往回拨，这都不同的拨法哈。这里这个 picking 呢是应该有一个 G 的，可是他这样拼呢，就是表示说这个唱歌的人他不知道这里有一个 G， 所以他发的音就是 pick， 而没有 king 那么多的鼻音在里面哈。 And then the last part is the chorus. Okay, so these are pretty simple lines, except that they are full of errors. And I don't think that Stephen Foster meant to put down about this Black people. He just want to capture their true sound, the voices of these people. He wanted to capture them. This is a song, it's a minstrel song by Stephen Foster, published in 1852. And then we'll talk about minstrel on the next slide. It's a slow set song in dialect 哈，他认为这种是黑人的方言哈。虽然我们常常说方言是某一个国家、某一个地区那里的人特别的话 ，but in this case, this is because a whole entirely population from another country who came to a different country and without education, so it becomes their language, their dialect. And it was written for the minstrel stage, and we'll talk about that later. In this song, the slaves are crying for a deceased slave owner. Deceased 是死人的意思哈。We say the word dead or death or die, but the deceased is a longer word, so it's a more sophisticated word than die. It seems saying, oh, he died, 好像 very rude. People don't want to say things that are rude to the dead people. So if you say deceased, it's more polite. Then we'll talk about minstrel show. In the old times, for example, you watch Verdi's opera called the Il Trovatore, that is 游唱诗人 there used to be singers who would maybe bring a piece of instrument, and they go from village to sing songs, to perform, to earn a living. And those are called the Il Trovatore, that is the Italian word for it. But in English, you would call it a minstrel, or in some other language, you would call it a troubadour. 这些都是所谓的游唱诗人 And then gradually, when people have a little more money, they want to see more entertainment, but they still could not go into town all the time. So a small band of people consisting of a minstrel who sings or tells stories, and maybe a singer or a dancer or a magician or a fortune teller, any kind of a group of people who would go from place to place to entertain people to make a living can be considered a minstrel show. But I was talking about Western Europe. They had this tradition. However, when it comes to America, the minstrel show is specifically about shows that are minstrels, have singing and dancing and so on and so forth, but there are white people painting their face black. So when you say minstrel show in America, it is a blackface show in America. It started in the early 19th century. And if you watch the news in recent years, there's a lot of people, especially politicians, became scandalous because they, when they were young, when they were in college, they painted their face black. Like Justin Trudeau of Canada, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, people found that when he was in college, I think it was the Halloween party, he had his face painted black, and he had to apologize for being so not sensitive to blacks' feeling. Because when you had the minstrel show, the show would have black white people pretending to be black and acting in the way in the last bullet. It says, dim-witted, buffoonish, superstitious, and happy-go-lucky. I can't see that word under that picture, so it is lazy. Okay, lazy. Yeah, I have people's picture of your pictures on the right. That's why I couldn't see part of the screen. But in a minstrel show, it is traditional to lampoon black people. Here is the word lampoon. Lampoon 就是开玩笑的意思哈。比方说Saturday Night Lampoon movie 就是他们除了有 Saturday Night Live 的这种秀开玩笑以外，他们也 make into a movie, so it give you more funny comedy to laugh about. So this word, a verb, is called lampoon. And minstrel shows lampoon black people as dim-witted. 在这种秀里面的黑人都是白人演的，可是他们是dim-witted， 就是说他的聪明智慧是很暗淡的，就是说不聪明的意思哈。我们有时候画一个灯泡这样亮起来，表示说 Oh, I got a good idea. And when your brain is dim, 就表示说你是一个很昏沉沉不聪明的意思，所以 dim-witted 就是说不聪明的意思哈。lazy 就是偷懒啊。buffoonish 就是 buffoon 是一种怎么说，好像说是乡巴佬的那样的人哈，或者说甚至是类似于猿猴类的动物哈，这个都是白人笑黑人的地方。还有说他是 superstitious， 就是很迷信哈。还有就是说这些黑人是 happy-go-lucky 哈，就是说一天到晚非常的乐观，因为他什么事都不晓得，糊里糊涂的过日子哈。So you have a minstrel show that represented the Black people as dim-witted, lazy, buffoonish, superstitious, and happy-go-lucky. That's why the black face is such a insensitive way for the white people to make fun of the Black people. And it was very common. So people like me who have never been to a minstrel show, I saw white people painting their face black. I did not know it is a derogative way to, let me put this word here, derogative. 就是一种看不起的态度，叫做 derogative. So the black face is a way for white people to show their contempt. Here we have contempt, 就是看不起的 contempt. So it is truly the wrong way for people to show respect to another race. So nowadays, a lot of politicians were found to have black-faced picture of themselves when they were younger. Like Justin Trudeau, I don't think he really meant to be that way, especially it is for a party, but he had to apologize. But there are some even older white people, politicians in America, they just refused to apologize. They thought black people are just inferior than white people. That is very, very not respectful to an entire race, especially to the people whom you kidnapped and enslaved for so many years. You should show some remorse. Remorse 就是后悔的意思，对不起的感觉哈 remorse. Remorse, I'm missing an R. remorse 是一种对不起的这种心情。Okay. So here is a slice about minstrel show. We were too late coming to this country. We hardly ever got to see such shows. If you were here in the 50s when televisions were just in the very beginning, then there you could see some minstrel shows. But most of us are here 70s, 80s, or 90s, or even later. So we did not get to see that. This song has a staying power. So-called staying power 就是说它一直很久人家都很喜欢，就是说它有这种很持久的吸引人的力量哈。即使 in spite of its racial naivete 哈，in spite 就是虽然它有这种在种族方面的太天真的这种看法哈，可是这个歌实在很好听，所以还是一直到现在还很多人唱哈。他说 naivete 呢，就是从 naive 这个字来的哈。naive 呢大概是个法国字哈，它的 I 上面有2个点哈。When you have a vowel 就是let me put something here, a vowel. 是一个母音哈，在我们的英文里面就有 A E I O U 5个母音哈，那其他的文我就不知道了哈。But in many other countries, they also have these 5 words, but they have 2 dots on some of these vowels. For example, naive. Where was I? Naive. Okay. I am hoping that when I write naive, it'll automatically, yeah, it gives me 2 dots on top of the I. That is, when you read this word and you see those 2 dots, you would read is naive instead of naive. N-I would be read as I, but naive. If you break the vowels A and I, you would pronounce it as naive. So in the future, if you see two dots, you would know that there are 2 vowels and they should be pronounced separately. For example, Israel. I don't think they will give me a naturally 2 dots, but originally, I mean, if you're French, you read Israel. There should be 2 dots on top of E. But because this word is used so often, the 2 dots were left off. Where was I? Okay, we had the word naive, and that is an adjective, 是个形容词哈. When you want to change that into a noun, you have naivete. That is it means the innocence or ignorance of the person, or inexperienced. So if you sing this song and you don't feel uncomfortable, that's probably you do not have this, you probably, because you have a racial naivete and racial delusion due to Foster's personal involvement in the song. Okay, let's move on. Massa is Foster's father, who died not a wealthy but a poor man. Foster was from Pennsylvania and died before the end. We were talking about Foster father, the father of Stephen Foster. He died before the end of Civil War, and he was in Pennsylvania, so he's not a big slave owner. Most of the big slave owners were in the South. Okay, Stephen's lyrics are compound. are a compound of guilt and grief. Okay. And then we talk a little bit about Al Jolson. Al Jolson is the black-faced person who is in that YouTube clip singing the song, Massa's in the Cold, Cold Ground. He is a regularly handsome white man, but he was from Lithuania. 我们叫做立陶宛人, most people in this country, the great majority of people in this country are from somewhere else. So from Lithuania is not as common as from Germany or England, but it's still, there are a lot of such people, especially by way of South Africa. I know a lot of people who are in South Africa, Jewish people being persecuted in Lithuania and Russia and so on. They moved first to South Africa and then moved to America. And Al Jolson is a Jewish person. I don't know if he came by South Africa, but when I was in South Africa, I was told a lot of Lithuanian Jews were there first before they moved on to America. This person is a huge, huge movie star. So if you haven't heard of him, here is something about him. He was born in Lithuania, 就是立陶宛。我们知道，波罗的海三小国就是有这个 Estonia, what's that? 爱沙尼亚 Latvia 就是拉脱维亚跟 Lithuania 这叫做三小国。He's a singer, a comedian, and an actor. He's been dubbed the king of blackface. So he was most famous for having his face painted black and make jokes and sing songs. A blackface performer. Okay, he was also dubbed the world's greatest entertainer. So he was a superstar, a big singer, and made a lot of jokes on stage and in movies at the peak of his career. His performing style was brash and extrovert. Brash 就是很不给人面子的，很讲话很刺激别人的哈。And extrovert 就是外向的哈。我们有 extroverted and introverted。就是有外向的人跟内向的人，那他是一个 extremely extroverted person, and he popularized many songs that benefited from his shameless, sentimental, melodramatic approach. 这些都是在形容他的这个 style 是很无廉耻的很怎么说没礼貌的sentimental 是说很动感情的 melodramatic 呢就是说他在表现他的感情的时候很极端的很不含蓄的意思这些都是一些特别的字用来形容他至于说他现在还有一个 slide 在讲他的In the 20s, he was America's most famous and the highest paid entertainer. 所以那时候所有的 superstar 里面，他是最 super 的 because he was paid the highest. Although he was remembered as a star of the first talking picture, the jazz singer, because he was the #1 performer or actor at that time. So when the world had the first talking movie, they hired him to be the jazz singer because he could sing too. So he draws a large audience, 很多粉丝所以他是被 remember as the star of the first talking picture. 他是第一个有声电影的演员。 After that, he was in many successful movies. And after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, he was the first star to entertain troops overseas during World War II. So he is a big star doing lots of things that are very out there. So I think you should have heard of him. Then we come to our next song, which is 黄鸟, Yellow Bird. It is 诗经, and we know that 诗经有国风、大雅、小雅、颂，或者简称为风雅颂。风就是各国各地的，或者是你说 regional 虽然是国，可是那时候的国其实也不是什么很大的国所以是 regional 的 folk song 就是风的意思。那这个是秦风，就是这一组歌都是从秦国来的，所以是秦风。你在国风里面有很多的国的风就秦风什么周南什么反正是很多啦。那这个是秦国的风那这个歌叫做《黄鸟》我们念一下这个第一段，它一共有3段。As you could see in this, that all the 3 are identical in structure and in meaning. They just change a few words so that it becomes repeated again and again. And in this one, there are 3 people we're talking about. So each paragraph would have a different person, and these 3 persons were brothers. So their last name is called 子居 So in this first paragraph, you see 子居燕袭, that is one of the 3 brothers. And this song goes like this: 皎皎黄鸟止于极. This is说, oh, you see those yellow birds? They were cackling, they were singing, or I would say cackling, maybe not a very tuneful song. They were just making some bird sounds, and they perched, 这个鸟停在树枝上，我们叫做 perch, 就是说 perch 就是停在一个树枝上的意思你像你如果养很多鸡的话，那到了晚上的时候 all the chicken they want to perch on branches because it's a little safer to sleep on the branch instead of on the ground, because you would not know if a 黄鼠狼 would come along, a weasel, weasel 叫做黄鼠狼So birds, just about all the birds except for the very big ones like ostrich, 像鸵鸟那样的以外鸟都是要 perch 在枝子上的，所以我们说止于极，就是说皎皎黄鸟它们停在这个极树上，而按照他们的annotation， 这个极树是枣树的意思，也就是说这两个字虽然写的是 side by side， 可是后来就写成 top and bottom 的枣树这个字棘其实也是荆棘，也是一种树but you know all the 所谓中国的四书五经这些都是 heavily annotated, so it's not up to me to say nah, it cannot be 枣树 because it's already accepted by 2,000 years of people. Scholars did all sorts of research, and when they say it's 枣树, it's 枣树. I cannot say it's not 枣树, okay? But of course, the words, Chinese words in ancient times, they often stack up things when we just put them apart. For example, a lot of trees, now we say, we write it as a tree on one side and another word on the right, like 橡树, 枫树, or whatever, hundreds of such trees. But at some point in time, for example, 李树, you have 李就是一个木上面一个子和木子李 that kind of tree it could also be written as a shu on one side and zi on the other side. The most common radical, 这个部首我们叫做 radical 哈。radical 有很多别的意思，可是现在我们说的是部首哈。Most of the time when you have a heart radical, that heart would be at the bottom or at the top. For example, 我们说心悸哈，一个心在左边，而季节的季在右边，或者说忘记的忘的话，就是王在上面，心在下面。But many of the old words with the heart underneath, nowadays we write them on the side. So don't be too stuck on the word, how a word should be written, because over so many thousand years it can change, and it does change. So we have the first line or two lines, the 皎皎黄鸟止于极哈。This is we called it 心哈，就是说 the people who wrote this song, they look up and saw the yellow birds, so they wrote the song starting with the yellow birds perched on the tree huh? That has nothing to do with the rest of the song. That's why it's called the 心 哈， 高兴的兴。But many of the 诗经 songs are written that way. They would start with something that had nothing to do with your story and then move on to the story huh? And we quickly, the line after that is back to business 啊，现在我们要讲这个故事在讲什么了。谁从木工子居焉习哈？子居焉习这个人是谁跟着秦穆公一起要被埋葬呢？就是子居焉习这个人哈。唯此焉习百夫之特，就是说 talk about this 焉习 he is 1 in 100. He could fight 100 people and he would still win huh? He was so brave and strong and we loved him so, and he was such a good person for the country. But when he was at this, it's not a cave huh? a hole in the ground, because he is to be sacrificed when his king, his ruler 秦穆公 died. He is still alive. I mean, Zhi Yanxi is still alive, and he approached this hole in the ground, and he was trembling with fear because he did not want to die. 比苍者天, all blue is the sky. Heaven, heaven, 见我良人. Why do you kill my good man? 子居焉习. 如可赎兮人百其身. If only I could pay a ransom to redeem him, then 100 of us are willing to die for him because he is such a good person. But this tyrant king, he has no conscience. He died and he wants Zhi Yanxi to be buried with him. The Zhi Yanxi is in such fright. 这个惴惴其力，就是他非常非常的害怕，发抖的意思。而我呢，就是一个旁观的人，我看到了这件事，我就觉得这个上帝太不公平了，怎么可以让我的这么好一个人死掉？如果那个国王愿意把这个人放开，让他自由的话，我们有100个人都很愿意为他而死。So this is a powerful, powerful story about a king who would take so many people with him, because it is thought that when you die, you need other people to help you. For example, to drive your car, to cook your meal. Everything has to be prepared by others. So you have to take all these living people with you so that you will be well taken care of after you die. This is what Qin Mugong was thinking. However, we now know that it's very, very wrong to do that. This kind of practice was in many, many, many other countries or cultures. But gradually people realized that it was the wrong thing to do. It's very inhumane and it's cruel and very insensitive. You are treating others as nobody, as something dispensable. Their life did not matter to you. Okay, so that is the first paragraph or verse, or we would say stanza. Let me try this again. So a stanza is a paragraph of in the poem or in the song. That's called a stanza, but I try to use the word verse or paragraph. It's more common. Here I have some notes. 早树, ji is 早树, 娇娇 is a 鸟声, and this word 赎 is redeem or ransom. So-called redeem, the most common word use of redeem is Jesus Christ the Redeemer. We all sinned, but Christ died on the cross so that we can all be redeemed. That's a basic theory of Christianity. 就是说，耶稣一个人死了，他就可以赎罪，把所有世上的有罪的人的罪都被赎掉了哈。这个赎呢，这是一个 redeem 的说法。那另外一个说法就是 ransom， 其实是两面哈，这同一个 action 的两个面。ransom 这个字呢，就是说 when somebody kidnapped, say, a child of a very rich people, they would send the father a ransom note saying, you must pay this much ransom so that I will release your son unharmed. Okay, 所以这个叫做绑票的赎金哈，所以这两个字呢 ransom 跟 redeem 都是用中文说是赎哈，那 ransom 呢就是赎金，而这个 redeem 就是赎罪的意思，或者是赎罪。
就这个娇娇你这里写要念瑶瑶。
OK， 读瑶瑶 OK，
是
OK， 那就要读瑶瑶 OK。 I did not pay much attention. I thought 那个鸟的叫的声音比较像娇娇的声音，所以我就忘记了 OK。 Now we come to the second stanza. Here we have 子居重行哈，子虚焉习的 brother 有子居重行 and the third one is called the 子居千虎哈。 So there are three brothers. They have the same father, Mr. 子居哈。那 here we have 瑶瑶黄鸟，止于桑哈。 Here you have to make some change because this is a different paragraph. So you would call this 鸟 is perched on a mulberry tree instead of we called it 枣树，我们叫做dates 哈，这个是普通人这样说法，因为这个 dates 呢跟那个阿拉伯人的这种枣椰或者椰枣是很像的 because it's dry and with a longish seed inside, different color. They have brown or orange or honey colored date palm, but they are very different from our 枣树，所以叫它 Chinese dates 是一个俗话哈。To be more academic, 枣树应该叫做 Sisyphus 或者叫做 Jujube. Yeah, because people don't know what they are because it's not available here in this country. It's very rare to have a tree or very rare for a supermarket to carry real Chinese dates. Yeah, most people who know a little better would say call it jujube, huh? But it's not a date, but most people who don't know would call it a Chinese date. And now we have mulberry. Mulberry is more common because you could see that tree almost everywhere in this country. However, it's not as common as in some silk-producing countries. When you go to Uzbekistan, just about every tree you see is a mulberry tree. I would say 90% of the trees are mulberry trees. But around here, it's rare. I know I've seen one near Nathan Hale High School, but it's very rare in Seattle. So we have 遥遥黄鸟止于桑，谁从木工子居重行 Here comes the name of the second brother. And 惟此重行百夫之防 All these paragraphs are totally parallel and their meanings are all the same. We had 百夫之特，百夫之防，就是说他一个人可以万夫莫敌的意思一个人可以抵得上100个人。And this 子居重行呢 he came to this big hole in the ground, 临其穴，惴惴其力，彼苍者天，兼我良人，如可熟悉，人百其身。All the rest are the same, just the tree is different, and 百夫之防这个字也 different. Of course, the name of the person is different. So the second stanza is almost the same as the first one, and so is the third one. We had 遥遥黄鸟止于楚 Here it says 楚 is a 荆树 Okay, 荆 looks like 有 spike 有刺的树 So it could be 荆棘那样的树。谁从木工子居千虎这个千就是针的意思。惟此千虎百夫之御这个御跟防跟特是一样的意思，就是一个人可以打100个人。临其穴，惴惴其力，彼苍者天，兼我良人，如可熟悉，人百其身。So the people really loved these 3 people who went to the grave with the ruler 木工They did not think it's right for the king to do such a brutal thing to such good people. And this story was found in 左传, in which it says 177人殉葬 At the bottom in red, it says 晚期木工 died in 621 BC. There were 177 people he took with him. They were alive and they were killed in order to be buried with him. So this is a horrible thing. Once you read it, it's very hard to forget about this poem. OK, 这是一首挽歌这个挽歌呢，我们常常有时候写一个车字旁，有时候写一个手字旁。这个就是因为in the funeral procession, the coffin would be in a carriage carried by a horse, and people who are reluctant to let this dead person go, they would grab this carriage and wanted to detain it 就是说这些活着的人呢不愿意死去的人死掉，所以他会用手这样抓住这个车，或者用手抓住whatever or the coffin or what coffin 就是棺材的意思那这个歌呢，在这个挽歌呢，我们是一个很 coffin 挽歌是一个很常见的，可以说是在中国的文学里是一个很大的类。You would have a poem or an essay or a discourse or a disposition or sorts of genre. We have genre. 这个文学里面的类分类里面就有的是议论文，有的抒情文，有的是诗，有什么呢？这些叫做 genre， 是个法国词所以念作 genre。那这个 elegy 呢，在中国的 literature 里面就是一个很大的类，有名的诗人很多都会写挽歌哈，比方说潘岳哈，潘岳写那个汉赋的时候，他就写了很多很多的挽歌哈，还有什么钟什么人 ，anyway，在西方也是有很多挽歌的哈，比方说 On the Wings of Song， 大概是 Schiller 还是海涅写的，很可能是海涅，写的就是The Song Without Word， 其实他把它排了那个歌词上去，就变成On the Wings of Song 哈，哒哒哒哒哒哒哒滴。那个是 Mendelssohn 门德尔松做的曲，可是他加了这个不知是海涅还是席勒的歌词在里面，非常美的一个歌哈。所以这个挽歌 elegy 是一种特别的文学的一个 category。Then we'll talk about human sacrifice. Human sacrifice is the act of killing one or more humans as part of a ritual. 这个 ritual 呢就是一个仪式哈。我们说礼记的话，这个礼记有时候叫做 rites and ritual 就是都是跟礼节有关的，这是一个礼节这样的一种。在这里就是一个葬礼的意思哈。Usually intended to please or appease gods, spirits, or the dead ancestor, such as I was going to delete this word, it's way too complicated. As an offering, so after I delete it will be an offerings.Or as a retainer sacrifice 这一大段说的是说 human sacrifice 有2种一种就是你要杀一个人呢，是为了要讨好一个上帝或者一个灵魂或者一个凶的 monster 或者是什么，就是用来 sacrifice 一个人，为了要让这个 God 高兴那另外一种呢，就叫做 retainer sacrifice， 就是说一个国王死的时候，他把他手下的这些人这些 retainer 都是他雇佣的人，他把这些人一起杀掉，就是为了要这些人去 take care of him after he died 所以这要讲到 human sacrifice 就有这样2种。比方说我们有很多电影是，比方说是 King Kong 那里的土人呢，他们就会把一个女人拿去 sacrifice 给那个 King Kong， 就希望他能够不来杀我们的村民，这是一种 sacrifice 或者你看 Joe and the Volcano with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan， 那个是他们到了一个有火山的地方，那个火山要爆发的时候，那个村子里的人 they want to throw a beautiful young girl to appease here we have the word appease, to appease gods.Or a volcano, or a monster animal, or whatever， 就是用 human sacrifice 来讨好一个上帝，或者是来安抚一个上帝，让他快乐，就不会带给你痛苦So, to summarize, there's human sacrifice to appease God, or a retainer sacrifice to let the dead ruler be happy about it 所以这个是一件很多的 culture 里都有这种事 but it gets to be less and less as people understand it's not right to do this to another human being, and it's not going to work to appease a god or to whatever, or to serve the dead person, because that's just superstition superstition 就是迷信的意思I think I saw that word a little before. Yeah, when we talk about the minstrel show, they depicted the Black people as being superstitious. Let's put this here. Superstitious. Okay, 就是迷信的意思As people became more respectful of another human being and became less superstitious. This kind of human sacrifice became less and less. In the last few hundred years, or 200-300 years, this is rarely seen except in the continent of South America. In the old days, for example, Egypt or many other countries have such a practice, but they long ago abandoned that practice. Okay, here are two other practices related to tribal societies. One is cannibalism, and one is headhunting. Cannibalism 是人吃人 we Chinese are more tolerant of such things. I wouldn't say tolerant, but in our culture, for example, when we read 水浒传, a lot of cannibalism, 就是人吃人 cannibalism were mentioned in 水浒传. So when we grew up, we did not really know that it's particularly wrong to eat people. We are also we were taught that if you're a very good and obedient son or official to the ruler or to your father, then you would cut a part of your flesh and let them eat when they're hungry. That's very common in Chinese stories. But in the Western culture, they think cannibalism is the worst of the worst thing. Worse than any other sin is to eat another person. So we had a lot to learn, okay? As to head hunting, it's like in the story of Wu Feng, 这个山地人就是 indigenous Taiwanese people, they would go head hunting, 就是出草杀人 They would try to appease God by killing people of another tribe, a neighboring tribe, and cut the head to offer to their God. Okay. We were taught about the story of Wu Feng when we were in, say, elementary school. Then I heard that it was wrong. It was not the truth, but I don't know what the truth was. I just know that right now they have stopped using Wu Feng as a story in elementary school curriculums, but I don't exactly know what went wrong. But certainly headhunting is something wrong. So if some people did not do headhunting and you accuse them of headhunting, that was wrong. But I don't know what exactly was wrong. Okay, now we're going to talk about England, Great Britain, and UK. They are three different things. And last time I mentioned that we use the word England or English as 英国 and 英国人, but we actually mean the land, the country, or the people of Great Britain or of UK, United Kingdom. There are differences between the three things. There was in the beginning England. England is the land of Anglia people, so that's why it's called England. The people of the tribe called Anglia, there's East Anglia and West Anglia. You would spell it as, you don't have to learn this word, but that's where this word came from, Anglia. Anglia. And they were quite not sophisticated. So there was no record, probably there was no written language about these tribes. And later on, there were other tribes like Saxon. Saxon, if you go to Germany, you would know there is I don't know 他们的省份叫什么哈，大概有一个区叫做 Saxon 哈。And I was also in eastern part of Germany where they had a Saxon area. That is because the Saxon people, as I mentioned, many people on the continent of Europe, they move from the east to the west. Gradually, one after another, they keep moving. And Anglia was probably originally in England, but Saxon people, they were from Germany and then move on to England. So that's why the English people are called the Anglo-Saxon. Huh? That is a very common word, Anglo-Saxon. Saxon, and that A should be, okay, S. So when we call traditional native English people, they are called Anglo-Saxon people. And so we say that the history started with AD 43. That is when Roman Empire started to conquer England. It may take more than 1 year to accomplish that, but the first year they went there was in the year 43. And before that, there was no written English history, okay? Of course, the people lived in that area for thousands and thousands of years. Everywhere there are people living there for thousands of years. In England, maybe 4,000, and I saw somewhere that's 8,000. But these people, they have their civilization. They must have a clothing or a hunting, gathering, fishing, or even domesticated animal, 畜养家畜. But there's not much more than that. When we talk about the history of England, you would start with the Roman Empire, because that's when another much higher civilization came there and established, they call it a Roman conquest. The Roman conquered that land starting in 43. So the entity that's called England was from 43 to 1707. After 1707, there's no country called England, only an area, a region called England. This country is no longer called England. It's called Great Britain, because England and Scotland became one country. They had a formal treaty. They combined the two parliaments to become one country. That's a Union Act. That's 1707. So after that year, you would say the country is called Great Britain, not England, okay? And we Chinese are very stubborn. So we insist on calling them England, so we would translate all the British words into 大英. You have 大英帝国, 大英图书馆, 大英 this, 大英 that. It is when they see the word Great Britain, they don't say Great Britain. Sometimes they do, they call it 大不列颠, but they still call it 大英. So a Chinese person coming out of China would say, oh, that the country England, the people, English people, but they are no longer called the England or English people. That's 1707. A little more about 1707 I will talk about. But then after that, Great Britain contained, England and Scotland and Wales, because Wales was part of England even earlier, but they did not change the name. But this entity called the Great Britain changed its name to United Kingdom in 1801 when they incorporated Ireland into it. So what you need to take away from today's class is England through 1707 and Great Britain from 1707 to 1801. and the United Kingdom starting in 1801 until now. Okay, so these are the 3 stages. So when you look at it, the very long history of England shadows all the rest. The first part is a very long, and the many, many stories we heard about it came from that period. However, it's no longer called England. You have to call it Great Britain or UK, huh? Right now it's called UK. Here I have a map of Roman Empire during the reign of Augustus, or you say Augustus. There was 凯撒大帝, Julius Caesar was the first person to become the emperor of Roman Empire. And after him, it was Augustus. And this map is in those years around 31 AC to 14 AD, Okay, I'm sorry, BC 到 AD, okay. 31 BC to 14 AD. That was way before England is a country. You can see this empire so huge with many, many layers of dates of acquisition, but England was not part of it. England is here, and it was not painted in any color because this was only through 14 AD, while this empire went to England in 43 AD, okay? So this is a map before England was on the stage, the world stage, okay? Here I have another chart. It is more in detail than the first chart that we had about England, Great Britain, and UK. It tells you how UK was formed. In the beginning, there was Wales Act in 1535, and this is probably in 1542, okay? So in those 2 years, Wales, there was some kind of law that incorporated Wales. Wales 就是威尔斯哈，是英格兰的西边的一块地方。They have different culture, different people, different language. But in those years, in the 1600s, they become part of England through a legal process that's called the Wales Acts. And this is before we talk about Great Britain. Then there's Union of Crowns. This is also before 1707. That is the crowns of England and Scotland combined to become one crown. That is James I. We all know that there was Elizabeth I, 就是第一个英国女王哈. She died in 1603, and she was never married, and she left no heir. There are all kinds of rumors about whether she had a son or some kind of child somewhere, but there was nothing legal. So she died with no heir. And she is arguably the greatest ruler this country ever had. In the beginning, this country, as I mentioned, during the Roman Empire time, they were so tiny and they had nothing, and some other country conquered them. And then we'll see that the Norman came in 1066. But Elizabeth I was the true greatest ruler this country has ever seen, and put England on the map of the world and becomes a super colonial superpower, okay? But she died in 1603, and there was no one after her. What do? They went to Scotland and asked King James IV to come to England to be their King James I. So this king is called King James IV and I, because he was James IV in Scotland, and he became King of England as James I. Okay, so the two countries were combined in 1603 into one country. It's called the Union of the Crowns. However, it was not legalized until 1707. That is why in 77, under the Acts of Union, the country becomes one and was called the Great Britain from then on. The country was actually one since 1603, but it was legal in 1707. So when you talk about English monarch, you would talk about people from Alfred the Great all the way to Elizabeth I. All these rulers, what we call them monarch, 就是一个君王哈，因为这里有一个女人，所以我们不能说 king 哈。monarch， 这个 monarch 就是君王，他也可以指男的，也可以是女的。而在这个英国的历史上，从这个 Alfred the Great， 等一下我们要讲 Alfred the Great， 从他以后，他统一了英国以后，因为他以前只是一个很小很小的国的，是 Wessex 的 ruler 哈，还说不上是一个国王，可是他统一了这个国家。So when you talk about English monarch, you started with Alfred the Great and you go all the way to 1603 when Elizabeth I died. And after that, there was King James and so on and so forth, all the way through 1707. That's about 100 years. At that time, the ruler was Queen Anne. There was a movie last year called The Favorite. Emma Stone was playing a favorite of Queen Anne in that movie. Well, she did not win Oscar for that. She won Oscar in the previous year for La La Land. So if you could have the opportunity to borrow the movie called The Favorite, in that movie, Olivia Colman played Queen Anne and she won an Oscar for it. So it's a pretty good movie. In 1603, the two parts of England and Scotland combined into one part, but the country was changed to Great Britain in 1707. So when we say English history through 1707, that contained these two incidents, that is the incorporation of Wales and Scotland into the England, that's country called England. However, they officially in 1707, it had changed the name to Great Britain. Then why is it changed again in 1801? We don't seem to know anything about it. That is because in that year, Great Britain and Ireland became one. So you had Scotland, first you had England and Wales, then you had Scotland, and in 1801 you had Ireland. So it becomes a United Kingdom. That's the year United Kingdom came into being. However, there's another change in 1922. It is not what you think. They did not add something else to it, but they took something out of it, because in the year 1922, part of Ireland became independent. So you have the Republic of Ireland becomes a different country. So this country of United Kingdom is a little smaller since 1922, okay? So it's quite a bit of a complicated story. So when you talk about UK, you have England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, okay? Because the Southern Ireland is an independent country. To summarize the history of England, you can say started with Alfred the Great, because he was the king of Wessex. Let me see if I have a map of Wessex here. In this map, this part is Wessex, and London is about here. So you have East Anglia, West Anglia, and you have Wales here, and the Wessex is here. And the great King Alfred the Great was the king of Wessex in the year 871. So what happened since Roman came here and left? It is just a mess of many small countries. And we have very little history about this country called England, because it was seven different countries. In this map, it's called the Anglo-Saxon Britain, the Heptarchy. That means a country with 7 parts. So this is that time before King Alfred. We call that the reason I show you this map of Roman Empire is that many countries' name came from this map. You can see that this part is called the Hispania. That is the Roman Empire called this part Hispania. And this part of Portugal is called Lusitania. So still, Lusitania is still the name of this part. They all came from Roman Empire. France was called Gaul, 就是我们叫做高卢哈 Gaul. But under the Roman Empire, it's called the Gallia, okay? And at that time, this, well, not when Augustus was the emperor, this part was named the Britannia as soon as the Roman Empire invaded there. So this word Britannia predates the country name of Great Britain, because Britain was a name as old as the Roman Empire. Okay, so you have other like Germania and Sarmatia, Armenia, all Italia, Dalmatia, Moesia. All these countries were part of Roman Empire with a certain name that was carried on through 2,000 years. So you would think, oh, Great Britain started in the year 1707, but the word Britain came way back from the Roman Empire, okay? So we're talking about Alfred the Great. You can say that his history of England started with Alfred the Great, but we don't know too much about him. But the most important thing in the history of England is William the Conqueror. 我们叫什么威廉大公哈的 Duchess of Duke of Brittany, okay? 他是一个法国来的一个外面的征服者. So he's called William the Conqueror. However, even though he's from France, he is from the part that's called Brittany. And Brittany is a part of France that was given to the Vikings. The Vikings 就是维京人哈，他们从Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. All these people are called the Vikings. They came down the ocean into all the rivers. They were in Russia, they were in France, Germany, they were in England. They were everywhere during the 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th centuries. They were everywhere. So some of them went to France, and they were so strong, and they refused to leave. So they had a treaty with France, the King Louis, certain Louis, and they had the treaty so that the part of France that's called Brittany belongs to the Viking people. And after a couple hundred years, there was William the Conqueror, who was a Duke of Brittany. He left led an army to invade England and conquered England. And these people are called Norman because they're from the north, 就是维京人 the Vikings. So William the Conqueror is the biggest thing in the history of England because the English people were totally lost. Their culture, their language, everything about them was under the conqueror of the William the Conqueror. Under the third bullet, it says that, oh no, I'm sorry, it's a later one, okay. So you talk about all these very, very arrogant English people, they were conquered by an invader and never recovered, okay? So the people remained the same, but the upper class were all foreigners, and they are Normans. Then the next one is 1604, when James I became the king of Great Britain after Elizabeth I died. And it became legal under the Acts of Union of 1707 under Queen Anne. And the Queen Anne ruled the Great Britain and until, I'm sorry, Queen Anne was starting from 1707, okay? And right now the queen is Queen Elizabeth II. So she is second Elizabeth, who is a monarch. However, there were people like Queen Anne who are queens that are rulers of the country. A few people know about Queen Anne, but they know William and Mary because Queen Anne is a wife of William, who was the king of the Netherlands. 荷兰的国王叫做 William， and 他娶了这个 Queen Anne 做太太，而 Queen Anne 是这个 James II 的女儿，结果就发生了光荣革命，叫做 The Glorious Revolution, that the king deposed James II and asked Queen Anne and her husband, William of Orange, to be the rulers. So they became joint rulers. William and Mary 是他们的 monarch. However, William died before Queen Anne. So when 1707 came around, William was dead. So it was Queen Anne who instituted the union of the two sides. Okay. So this is where I am. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. I could go on, but there is no time. Okay. I would show you this picture, which is Pope Gregory, who is a pope in Italy, in Rome. And he went to the market and saw some slave kids and slave men and women being sold. They were from England. So he said, we should send somebody. Our bishops and the missionaries should be sent to England to make them Christians because they were not Christians. So 所以他们没有得救哈。So Pope Gregory first sent St. Augustine as a missionary to England in the year 596. After that year, you could say England became a Christian country. And in the eyes of Christians, England was barbaric until that year, okay? And yeah, these are some, this is a tapestry, it's an embroidery, 就是刺绣哈，这个叫做 embroidery 这个很长的刺绣，它有230尺长哈 ，230 feet long and 20 inches wide, a very, very long tapestry. They call it tapestry, but it's an embroidery. Usually when you say tapestry, it is woven, 是一种织出来的地毯或者壁毯哈。But this bayou tapestry is embroidered， 所以它是刺绣的。This is about the conquest of William the Conqueror, how he prepared to launch an attack in England. He landed on the shore in Kent and had the Battle of Hastings. It's called Battle of Hastings in 1066. 1066 is an important day for you to remember because William the Conqueror from Brittany, which belonged to Vikings but lived in France, they came to England and conquered England. And from then on, England was totally beneath them because they confiscated all the property, all the land or buildings owned by English people no longer did so because they now belong to the conquerors. And they could not be officials or they could not own property or do whatever. They became a second-class people. Only the Norman people from France who were Viking, they were on top of the society and the English people were totally underneath. And that's where they learned the trick. When they conquered Ireland, they did exactly the same thing to put all the Irish people underneath them. So they are poor and starving. That's the way it was. Okay. Nowadays, we should not be doing that anymore. Do you have any questions? Okay.
So those
So
people are barbarian, very, very violent.
They are what?
Barbarian.
Yes. Yeah. You have this Roman Empire, which is huge. According to that map, you can tell it's huge. But they still could not conquer the whole world. They tried very hard to conquer people north of River Rhine, 莱茵河 and 多瑙河. Above those rivers, it's Germany, and they are called barbaric people. To the Roman people, German people are barbarians. And in England, they also have, like Qin Shi Huang, they built a great wall, the Hadrian Wall. It's to fend England against Scots because the Scots are more barbarians. They are stronger. That's why there is a war. And the Roman Empire decided they're not going to try to conquer the Scottish people. So they built a wall there. And you can still see them now.
Then this is Lucy.
Yeah.
I have question about the 英文怎么中文就是什么 Scandinavia， 我们那个
Scandinavia， Scandinavia 就是北欧了。
所以它就是跟那个 Norman 是一样的意思吗？
对，也可以这样说。
也可以这样说。
北边的人叫做 Norman， 他们所在的地方叫做 Scandinavia。Generally speaking, you would have Denmark and Norway and Sweden and maybe some part of Finland too.
Then how about they call them is Norrens？ 有一个博物馆在巴首，它那个博物馆的名字就是 NOR 什么 Northern， 也是北欧的意思。
是啊，就是北边的人就叫做 Norman 啊 ，Norman， 像 William the Conqueror， 他们这些人都算是 Norman， 所以有这样的博物馆。我们这边也有一个叫做什么，我也忘记了。
就 Northern， 在巴首那里，我曾经去 visit。
这样哈，那我就不知道了。呀，我们在 Ballard 这边有一个，Ballard 这边有一个。
对。而且还不便宜，好像要20几块美金一个入场券，然后它里面不是很大，但是它就是保存一些北欧的东西。那因为在老师刚才介绍的那个时代里面，就是 Roman Conquer 那些，或者是 William Conquer， 他们还没有北欧还没有 真正的成为几个国家，像现在这么明显，它
Yeah，
就是
对
一个那一种有点像部落，
Yeah，
很多部落这样子，那比较大比较小，而且他们
嗯
也说着一些他们自己的方言，
对对对，
然后他们
都
信奉
很近
的，
似的，
然后他们是信奉多神教，就是
哎，对
有
对对
点类似那一种
，Yes，
那种那个叫做什么那个什么希腊神话一样，就是森
可是不一样
面
它不是从希腊来的，从
对
Norman 来的神话，后来传到比方说英国跟这个德国都有他们的这些神话。For example， Wagner Richard Wagner 就是理查华格纳，他写的歌剧里面有很多很多都是 German 的神话改编的，可是里面的这些神呢，都是从北边来的，像 Wotan 啊，什么 Thor 啊，什么Odin 啊，Odin
海神
都是北边的神，
老师，那他们这些神话又是从哪里来，或者是被什么影响呢？
我想原则上这些神话是从北欧来的，可是后来传到南边，有很多地方都有。那南边的人呢，同时也受到从希腊来的影响，希腊的神话很多很多，整个都被罗马人接受下来，然后因为希腊的很多的历史啊、政治啊、文学啊、诗歌啊什么这些都变成整个西欧的文化，所以他们就认为他们都是希腊的后代，所以希腊的这些神话什么都等于是整个西欧的神话都是同一个传统了。But they all came from Greece.
那我还要再继续那个什么 study 我很喜欢看 History Channel， 它里面曾经介绍过整个就是那些 Viking 他们的历史。
我想他们在政治上并不是很有规模的，就好像成吉思汗这个元朝，他一下把整个世界通通都占下来，一转眼就过去了，因为他不会统治他们。那这些 Viking 呢，他们就做各种的 raid RAID， 就是到处去偷袭人家，烧人啊，烧房子啊，可是然后他就走掉了，就是也有季节性的，所以他们并没有在其他的国家，除了这个 Normandy 这以外，其他的国家是有一些零星的 Viking 的人，可是并没有被 Viking 统治就是了。
他基本上 Viking 以前也是英国统治嘛，
不是，英国是被 Viking 统治，在这个
我是说在 Viking 那个区呢，以前也是英国人去那边。后来 Viking 因为大饥荒的关系，因为地球演变，那个气候演变，他们变成大饥荒，所以他们变成到处去抢人家的东西，
对，
然后变成到处去留种，然后他们就留在那边，所以他可以从 Viking 一直到欧洲，到苏联，
是对都有他到处都有，可是你不能说 Viking 统治了他，除了
他没有统治，他到处跑去。
你在爱尔兰或者在英国旅行的时候，就会看到有一些遗迹，比方说爱尔兰有一些很高的塔，就是Viking 来的时候，整个他们所有村子人通通都跑到塔里去，这样那个 Viking 就打不进去，他们就这样子活下来。所以那有几百年都是经常有 Viking 来进攻，可是并没有被 Viking 统治。
因为那时候 Viking 到处去抢的时候，他们最喜欢抢的就是教会、教堂的
对呀，
对
教会
他抢到了东西以后，他用他们的航行技术呢，到处去交换，跟人家交换卖所以他们每到一个地方，就有些人留在那个地方，然后变成他们的子民了所以他分散的是全世界到处都去，但是他没有统治了
所以在我这个 History No.1 这里，就是说开始是 Roman 来了，然后就是有 Anglo-Saxon 的人，很多是外地来的，然后就是这个7个国家的，而且变成是信基督教。那再下去的这一大段时间就是 Viking 好几百年都来这里骚扰，可是 最后还是被他们赶出去了。当然，最后他们自己统一，就是 Wessex 的这个 King Alfred the Great，然后他们就统一成一个国家。到了 Norman 的时候，就是1066年的时候，才变成真正的 Norman 统治的英国。
而且 Viking 里面也有女人很强势哈。
是有这样的，像 Iceland 的人，我不知道他算不算 Viking， 因为 Iceland 是女人还是很占，是。
他应该是属于那个。
在这里有一段哈，在这个 King Alfred 统一了英国以后，有一段时间叫做 England under the Danes and the Norman Conquest。他事实上他的这个国王有时候是 Norman 人，有时候是丹麦人，丹麦人其实也是 Norman 人，就是这个一会儿又是英国人做国王，一会儿又是这个北欧人轮流做国王，一直到了Conqueror William 的 Conqueror 以后，才变成完全是一个英国的国家，可是是 Norman 人所占的。
所以说现在苏联人他们的人种是属于比较 Caucasian 但是他们
算是斯拉夫的民族。
斯拉夫呢，其实就是 Viking 跟古代的 Mongolian 混血所以他们的种看起来又像白种，但是又不是白种所以变成 Anglo-Saxon 不接受他们是白种所以他们变成有一点心理上很不平衡了
对。
然后还有就是说，这个人种呢，从欧洲古代是尼安德达种尼安德达种，然后到后来的现代智人混血以后，留在那边的一个，像刚 Lucy 讲的很多的 tribe， 但是都是分散各地的小王国了并没有真正的统一了后来才有这个 Roman 或者说那个德国的联合，这样统一变成一个当地的强权起来。那在更早以前，大概就是小城堡互相攻伐，然后互相打来打去而已了。那我是看那个 National Geography 讲的是，现在呢，在欧洲的白种人里面呢，是南欧种的呢是比较，在欧洲人认为是比较低级的啦。那 Anglo-Saxon 是纯白种的所以德国种或英国种这个是比较好层级的了然后呢，他们又有说到苏联去，到苏联这个地方，然后就往欧洲再回流，大概6000年前再回流过来了然后对，所以他那个 National Geography 的题目叫做 People are moving 就是大家一直在 move， 我们从欧洲移到东亚，到苏联这边，然后再往回移去，然后互相在混血，还有互相在等于是什么打来打去那统治
我可以再分享一件事吗？还有时间，很快的。
OK，
我先生他们的家族就是一个例子。Dr. Chen， 他的爸爸是南欧人，就是意大利人，